Ken Schaefer here out on another ruck. I personally do most of my rucking by myself. I'm hoping to change that, but right now I do it mostly by myself in the forest, on trails. I live in New England, so there's lots of forests and lots of trails. Whether you're rucking by yourself or even in a group, there's some basic safety equipment that you should be carrying with you. So I'm going to go over all the safety equipment I bring with me, and I'll explain my reasoning behind it. So stay tuned. Hey, Ken Schaefer here. I told you I would discuss some emergency equipment that I would bring on me with a ruck, and this is just the most basic equipment. If I'm going longer or deeper into the woods, I would definitely be carrying more than what I'm showing you now. But I think everyone should invest in bushcraft and survival skills, and learning the basics will keep you alive. You need to know how to start a fire, you need to know how to build an emergency shelter, you need to know how to process water to make it safe to drink. So if you do have those skills, things I'm going to show you will seem very familiar. If you don't have those skills, you may wonder really how useful they are. But believe me, I've thought about this quite a bit, and I have invested in that training. And I can use everything here for multiple purposes in a survival situation. I can create a shelter, I can create a fire, I can process water, I can do basic first aid. So, of course, the first thing you need to bring with you is a phone. You need to leave with it fully charged. You need emergency numbers readily available so that you don't have to look for them. You know, if it's an emergency, you want to open up your phone, press something, and have it call 911 or the person you need to come and get you. But you should have that all set and ready to go. You should also have a power bank and the cables you need to connect your phone to the power bank. Flashlight, preferably a rechargeable flashlight. If it's not rechargeable, you need spare batteries. A rechargeable flashlight can be powered up with a power bank, and it can act as a power bank for your phone, so you can have a little system going there. But make sure you have the cables. Alright, fire. You should have at least 2 ways to start fire. You have a Bic lighter. It doesn't have to be a Bic lighter, but a Bic lighter is a good choice. They're very reliable, and it would be my go-to in an emergency situation. If it's very wet or windy, you're going to need an alternative way to start a fire. So I have a ferro rod, and a ferro rod is something you can scrape with some sharp metal object, and it will throw sparks, and you can use the sparks to get a fire going. That's a skill you will need to invest in and learn. You will notice that I have the Bic lighter wrapped in Gorilla Tape. And that Gorilla Tape has multiple purposes. It can be a makeshift bandage, and it can be some tinder. So if I need to get a fire going and I can use this as tinder, I don't have to go around and process something in the environment to create the tinder. If you're not skilled at starting fires, and again, I think everyone should invest in becoming skilled at starting fires and safely managing them, have at least 2 Bic lighters on you, and always make sure the Bic lighters are nearly full of butane and working before you leave. So, tools, you should have a multi-tool, a knife. Now, these are pretty basic. This is like if I'm tooling around my house at my neighborhood or the local park or whatever. If I'm going deep into the woods, I would have probably a full tang knife so that can help process wood, and I would have a much more extensive multi-tool. I think 2 important things in a multi-tool is that it has a blade, so it can be a backup to your knife, and it has pliers. Some people don't care about the pliers. They prefer a Swiss Army knife type of thing. It's a matter of personal preference. Everyone has their own way of doing things. But for me, I do like to have a pair of pliers. If nothing else, if I have to boil water, I can grab the container out of the fire with the pliers and let it cool off somewhere. Again, the uses of these two things, there's a long list of them. If you invest in learning some bushcraft and survival skills, you will know what to do with these and everything that they can do to save your life. Now, I talked about boiling water. Everyone should have a water container with them. I think that your water container should be made of metal, single wall metal containers. If you have double wall, that's used for insulating the water and keeping it warm or cold. And if you need to boil water and you have an insulating container, what's going to happen is that it's going to insulate the water from the fire and you won't be able to get it boiling. So you want a single wall metal container. And there are good reasons why you should not ever have plastic containers for your water. Plastic is full of toxins that leach into your water. So if you're drinking water out of plastic water bottles, stop. You're just poisoning yourself. If you're going to drink bottled water, get it in glass containers or metal containers. Stay away from plastic. There's only one exception for carrying water in a metal container, and that's if you're in an Arctic or very cold environment and you need to keep the water from freezing, then you're going to need a special kind of container to insulate it from the cold and keep it from freezing. Otherwise, every time you want to take a drink, you're going to have to light a fire, melt your water supply, and then drink it. Obviously, when you boil water, you leave the cap off, otherwise the container can explode. Now, I live in New England, so usually if I'm not going too far, one of these will suffice. If I'm going further out into the woods, I will take multiple containers. Water is heavy, so you want to limit the amount of water that you have to carry. Now, I can usually carry enough to cover myself for a day, maybe a day and a half, if necessary. And I live in New England, as I keep saying, and there are many natural water sources. So if I'm stuck out somewhere in an emergency situation, I can almost certainly replenish my water supply. I would filter the water that I'm filling this bottle with through a clean cotton cloth and filter out all the crap in the water, and that way I can boil it, make it safe to drink, bring it to a boil for like 3 minutes, and then let it cool off and drink it. Now, you don't have to filter your water, but there's a lot of stuff that can be floating around the water. It won't hurt you if you boil the water, but it could be yucky, could make the water taste bad. So just filter it. Now, this cotton cloth has many uses. Filtering water, it can be a bandage, it can be a makeshift tourniquet, it can just be used to keep the sweat out of your eyes, which can be very important if you're in an emergency situation. And it has many other uses. If you invest in learning some bushcraft and survival skills, you can learn about those uses. A whistle, you want to use a whistle because voices don't carry very far out in the wilderness. The sound of a whistle will carry a lot further, and usually if you blow on a whistle, people will stop and wonder why someone's blowing on a whistle, and they'll stop and look. So if you need to get someone's attention, a whistle is a great thing to have. And I have this on my shoulder strap, on my rucksack, so I can just pull it directly to my mouth and blow. It can also be used as a warning device if you see someone going into some place that's unsafe or doing something that's unsafe. You can blow on this, they'll probably stop, look at you, and then you can help them out. And if you're stuck out overnight, you can blow on this occasionally, and the local animals will probably try to stay clear of that noise. It will confuse them and startle them, and they'll leave the area. Now, I don't know what kind of wildlife you have in your area, but here, most of the wildlife is pretty docile, and they don't want to bother people, and they don't want to be bothered by people. So it's not too much of a problem. We do have bobcats around, we do have bears, but both of them are not aggressive varieties, and they fortunately leave people alone for the most part. Cordage, this is paracord. You want some good, solid cordage. It doesn't have to be paracord, but something that really can take a beating. It has a million uses, one of which is to create a ridge line if you need to create an emergency shelter, and you can do that with one of the other items I'm going to show you. It can obviously tie things down. It can make minor repairs on your pack if necessary. It's just really handy to have some paracord or some kind of tough cordage with you. It wouldn't even hurt to have a variety of different kinds of cordage. Paracord is good for a lot of purposes, but it's not so good for a lot of other purposes. Anyway, if you invest in learning some survival skills, you will understand just how handy cordage is in a survival situation. So I also bring a Mylar emergency poncho. Now, you don't need to have an emergency poncho. You can have just a regular poncho as long as it will protect you from the rain. This has multiple purposes. One, keep me dry if it's raining, and here in New England, it can start raining quite suddenly when you're out in the middle of nowhere. This can be used to create an emergency shelter along with your cordage. You create a ridge line with your cordage and then use this to put up like a little tent and keep you dry. It can also be used to insulate you from the ground. So if you don't need to protect yourself from the rain, but the ground can be pretty cold, you can put this down and it will help insulate you from the ground. So a poncho of some kind. Finally, this is a bivy bag, and if I only had to take one thing with me, this might be it. So this is a Mylar bivy bag. It's like think of it as like a sleeping bag. If you're stuck out somewhere and the temperature's dropping and or it's starting to rain, this will keep your body heat in and keep the rain and moisture out and can save your life. It can keep you from becoming hypothermic. And I've seen and read stories of people who have used these in extremely cold, snowy conditions where they were completely unprepared except for having a bivy bag like this. They got into the bivy bag, survived the night because it kept them warm and protected them from the elements. Now, you're probably not going to be all warm and cozy in this thing, but it will keep you alive. So depending on where you are, you may want to consider getting a water filter. Layers of clothing can be important depending on the weather. If I were going out into the woods very deep or for very long, I would definitely have a dedicated saw with me, a hand saw, so that I could process wood. I would have more extensive equipment that might be heavier, but would make a survival situation much more survivable. Alright, I hope I've given you something to think about. So until the next video, thank you for watching, and goodbye.